Me right now to talk more about it is House Ways and Means Committee Chairman, Congressman Kevin Brady. Mr. Chairman, congratulations to you. You've been working on this a long time, and you got it out yesterday.
Thanks, Marie. It is exciting. Everyone's fired up about changing this broken tax code, and you've been leaning in on this issue and the challenge for a long time.
So let's talk about what we might hear in terms of differences here. I mean, we want to really look at the road to passage, obviously, at this point. I want to dig deeper into the details, but in terms of passage, are you expecting major changes from the Senate's version when it comes out? Is that in the next couple of days? How alike are they, and how different might they be?
You know, my understanding, Maria, is it will be in the next few days. You know, I think here's the good news. With President Trump, the Senate and the House, we drew the same target in this unified framework earlier in the fall. So we're both riding, all of us, to that framework as the House obviously showed. Can there be some differences on the Senate side? Sure. But I think we're going exactly the same direction. And we call our bill Tax Cuts and Jobs, because that's exactly what we achieve in this.
So what kind of behavior are you expecting from, for example, business people now that you see a 20% corporate tax rate? Let's say that you do get this passed. There's a 20% corporate tax rate, 25% pass through. What's the behavior of businesses, and how does that lead to growth and jobs, sir?
Well, first, every business is going to know that they can invest more with that full and unlimited expensing. They know when they make a decision that they're competitive, whether it's on Main Street, around the world. They'll know they can bring those stranded dollars back to the United States from overseas. And more importantly, when they compete and win, going forward, the tax rate to bring it back and reinvest is zero. So we expect very strong response from our local businesses wherever they're competing. And that translates, by the way, not into just more jobs, but higher paychecks. And that's one of the key goals of this tax reform.
And I know that we've already seen one company just yesterday announce, Broadcom, that's going to move its headquarters, domicile here in America as opposed to Singapore. But you still have the pushback on the left. You've still got pushback in the media. I want to ask you about the state and local tax deduction elimination, because that seems to be where one of the fight is happening. Democrats, Mr. Chairman, came out strongly against this bill. I want to know how you push back on this. Listen to this. This is what a number of Democrats said yesterday.
Republicans ambushed the American people with this half-baked tax bill, written in the dark, to be raced through Congress before it is understood. It raises taxes on the middle class, millions of middle-class families across the country, borrows trillions from the future.
This plan is a tax burden that ought to be on the backs of the wealthy and the biggest corporations, but instead it drops it squarely on the backs of the middle class.
All right. So, and also Andrew Cuomo, by the way, New York governor, joined me yesterday. He said the plan is a scam. What's the pushback, sir? What do you want to say to that, to Chuck Schumer?
Let me sort of quote the Washington Post that gave Chuck Schumer's claim about a tax on the middle class for Pinocchios. It's simply not true. In the American people get this. Look, when you lower these tax rates, when you simplify the code so much so, 9 out of 10 Americans are filing on a postcard-style system. There's a simplicity and a fairness that's missing from the current tax code. Middle-class Americans get that. The other thing they know and get as well, their paychecks have been stuck flat for a decade. They know if we can get our businesses competitive, it is good for them. And by the way, I think 8 out of 10 Americans say Congress needs to tackle tax reform, and many of them say their lawmaker needs to work with President Trump to get this done. So I think there's a disconnect between Democrats up here in Washington and real people back home.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because yesterday we had a real estate developer on, Don Peebles, here on the program, and he said there's going to be a mass exodus out of places like New York because the people are going to recognize that they don't have that deduction anymore, able to deduct the state and local taxes, meaning they're going to pay more in taxes, meaning they're going to be putting pressure on their governor. So do you think over time, and I know this doesn't happen overnight, but over time this will put pressure on the local legislators, the governor, the mayor, to actually stop spending or lower spending and lower taxes?
Well, there's no question it pulls back the curtain so Americans actually know how their governors and how their mayors are taxing them to the hilt. So there's no question about that, but I'll make 2 points about this. One, we know from the Kennedy tax cuts, and we know from the Reagan bipartisan tax cuts, when you got the economy going, state and local revenues took off. So there'll be more than enough money to be able to fund those services. And secondly, if you look at states like New York, most of their tax contributions are because their economic engine, Wall Street, their businesses, just that mass energy that comes from the state of New York. Under this growth bill, you're going to see more investment, more growth, more jobs. And so if people leave that state, it'll be because the taxes are simply too big a burden for them as a family or business. But from a growth perspective, they're in the center of, I think, a very positive energy going forward.
I mean, it's a real choice that people might face. If you're a New Yorker like a Don Peebles, who was sitting next to me yesterday, he says, my tax rate's 53% because I'm going to be taxed under the 39.6. Plus, you got city and you got the Obamacare tax. You got state, takes him up to 53%. Why would I pay 53% in New York when I'll move to Florida and pay 25%?
Well, you got to ask the governors and the mayors who assess this. Right now, it strikes me it's sort of the foxes are eager to guard the hen house right now to make sure they can tax their businesses and families as much as possible. Look, we're trying to lower taxes. And Maria, this is what we know. Because of that standard deduction doubling, the lower tax rates, we repealed AMT, and we've restored that state and local property tax. New Yorkers are seeing tax relief in this bill. And so, look, we want to deliver that. We want people to keep more of their money regardless of where they live. But look, they can look to those governors and mayors and ask, hey, what is up in our state?
Yeah, but you know what? Andrew Cuomo, the other day when he was with me on the show, made a point. He said, he basically suggested that this is payback for not voting for Donald Trump. He basically said, look, is it a coincidence that New York didn't vote for Donald Trump, California? What do you say to that?
Well, I would say those taxes in New York City have been high for an awfully long time.
Yes.
They just have. And look, this isn't about red state, blue state. This is really about fairness and simplicity and growth and making sure that people just, can lower taxes and everyone can pay their own regardless of where they live. And people really appreciate Washington won't punish or reward you depending on where you choose to live and work. That's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.